some signs that you're never going to be a millionaire? That seems to me like you probably want to know those signs to make sure that you're not doing those in your own life. So on the program today, we're going to share some of those things to kind of beware if your goal is to try and become a millionaire. And after all, that sounds like a pretty good goal, right? Wouldn't you want that? So we're going to give you some things to be thinking about along that journey to that seven-figure status. Plus, we'll talk about how you can increase your return by over 1% per year as a retiree without taking any additional risk in your portfolio. That sounds pretty interesting, because if you can get extra return without extra risk, that's certainly something to follow if you're a retiree or getting close to becoming a retiree. Plus, we'll also talk about our latest blog post about what people have a tendency to overspend money on, sort of a particularly important subject during the holidays when there's a lot of folks out there that are perhaps overspending this holiday season. So welcome to the program. This is, of course, Dollars and Cents. We're Central Florida's longest running radio program, coming to you here on the News Radio WFLA Orlando network, along with 96.9 The Game. Also happen to be one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web. So be sure and check us out on your favorite iTunes, Spotify, whatever the case may be, favorite social media channels. My name is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary with Nelson Financial Planning, where our team of certified financial fiduciary stands ready this week to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan that produces superior investment results and provides you with peace of mind for the future. So, but before we get to all of that, we thought we would talk a little bit about what are some of the options that folks have beyond sort of the normal default option, if you will, in today's world, which for many people is the retirement plan that their employer provides. And don't misunderstand this. The starting point for saving for your retirement really should be looking to your employer and seeing what is the available options to just have that savings happen automatically out of your paycheck. But there are some limitations in terms of that employer retirement plan. Oftentimes the money that's getting saved there is on a pre-tax basis, which is good, but then the flip side is that you've got to pay taxes when you take the money out. More and more employers are in fact offering Roth options within the 401k, so that's getting a little bit better. It used to be that a lot of employers would offer matching incentives or matching donations to that retirement plan that they sponsor. Unfortunately, sort of less and less now on that front. But the other limitation, of course, with employer retirement plans is that means that you've got to have your money with wherever it is that your employer has decided to have the plan with. And maybe that's a good provider, maybe that's a bad provider, maybe it was just the cheapest cost provider, which is unfortunately the case in terms of what a lot of employers do. More importantly, the investment options may not be as broad and often aren't because of the transition to target date funds and things like that. So pretty limited in terms of the investment choices. If you listen to the program, I think it was last week or maybe a couple of weeks ago, you know that we have a very distinct opinion on those target date funds. Oftentimes they all sort of look the same and don't really generate the kind of performance that you would expect on them. So there are certainly some limitations. Don't get us wrong, though. Employer retirement plan, certainly a great place to start in terms of saving for your retirement. But we wanted to at least put on the table so that you were aware of some other options that you have in terms of saving money for the future. So first and foremost is you can have your own retirement account. You don't have to rely on your employer to provide you a retirement account or a retirement plan. You can have your own. It's called an IRA, an individual retirement account. The name sort of lends itself very nicely to what in fact it is. It is a retirement account that you set up individually. Similarly, you can also have a Roth IRA, which is an individual retirement account that has the Roth tax aspects. The IRA, of course, you put the money in, you get a tax deduction on your tax return. And I guess that's sort of the extra step that you have to do when you're doing an IRA versus an employer plan, because the employer sort of will do that for you in the form of a W-2 reflecting the contributions that you made to the plan. So there's not a second step, but if you do your own IRA, there is that second step of having to report that on your tax return. Similarly on the Roth, of course, is after tax contributions, but then you wind up being able to take that out without having to pay any taxes or anything like that when you actually retire. So two different types of accounts, both of which you can set up on your own. There's a multitude of ways in which to try and set that up across the board, and ultimately you wind up having to have an option to be able to do that on an individual basis. There are some limits in terms of how much you can contribute for those types of accounts. $6,000 if you're under age 50, $7,000 if you are over age 50, but there is a range of investment options, right? Because you can set that up wherever you want, and certainly pretty easy to set those up. You can set those up so that there's an automatic deduction out of your checking account, things like that. So that's sort of option one, is having your own retirement account separate from your employer. Another option, if you're eligible to do this and you have to have a high deductible health insurance plan, those high deductible health insurance plans are ones that allow you to have a health savings account. Now, the neat thing about a health savings account is it is a triple. It has triple tax benefits, if you will. When you put the money into a health savings account, you get a tax deduction for the contribution. Along the way, it's growing on a tax-deferred basis. And then, most importantly, when you take it out for medical expenses, it comes out tax-free. So that's a really powerful option that people have. Certainly, one of those high deductible plans means that you have to have that type of plan. It means that typically you've got a $1,400 deduction as a single person, $2,800 if it is a family coverage on that plan. So in order to have a health savings account, you've got to have a high deductible insurance plan. Similarly, there's a limit on the contributions that you can do to an HSA, $3,550 for individually, $7,100 for family. But certainly some great options there on an HSA. And here's the best thing about the HSA is that if you don't use the money in a current year, it rolls forward. So it's not a use it or lose it, but it continues on and is certainly available for you. Another option, the third option, is just having a regular investment account. That's after tax money. There's no limit on it. You can put any number of investments in it that you want. So there's certainly no tax benefit now, but the future on it certainly gives you some tax benefit. So the best approach, obviously, start with the employer retirement plan, but then continue to have look at all of these other options that you can do on an individual basis. We'll be back after these messages. About saving to become a millionaire, right? Isn't that a great goal? 7 figures, nice big round number. So we thought it would be good to share with you some of the signs to watch out for. If you're not doing these things, then you're probably hurting yourself in terms of getting to that goal of becoming a millionaire. So welcome back to Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. We're Central Florida's longest running radio program, coming to you here on the News Radio WFLA Orlando network, along with 96.9 The Game. Also happen to be one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web. So be sure and subscribe to us on your favorite social media or podcast channels. Those are certainly a ton of them out there, and we're on a bunch of them as well. So if you have a problem finding us, go to our website, nelsonfinancialplanning.com, and look in the upper right-hand corner, and you'll find some icons that you can click on that get you directly connected to our channels on those different formats. My name is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary with Nelson Financial Planning, where our team of certified financial fiduciaries stands ready this week to help you achieve a successful and cost-effective retirement plan. So what are those warning signs, if you will, to be on the lookout for that you might be at risk, if you've got these warning signs, you might be at risk that, hey, I'm not going to make it. If I've got a goal of achieving $1 million before I retire, I'm not going to make it. Here are some of the signs that you might be off track. First and foremost, you're not saving your raises. You're not banking your raises. This time of year, right? Typically annual reviews are happening among employers. I know we did those just this past week at our organization. And so oftentimes, or hopefully, that means that you got an associated raise with that annual review. And so what that means is to get to that $1 million threshold, you've got to be saving, a chunk of your income, right? And so a good rule of thumb is usually 10 or 15%. The reality is, though, if you're at zero, to jump to 10 or 15%, that's pretty tricky, right? But if you bank your raises, let's say you're getting just, even just a cost of living type of raise, a couple percent, then over the course of 4 or 5 years, if you constantly bank your raise, then guess what? Hey, 4 or 5 years from now, you're at that threshold of saving 10% of your income. So the notion of banking your salary increases really is a great idea that allows you to save money without necessarily having to change your behavior, because changing behavior is awful difficult. Certainly changing your behavior and saving more money, that's a great way to do it, but oftentimes people find that difficult. So if you have additional sort of money beyond what you have been making, then we encourage you to take sort of that top line growth, that salary raise, and use that to contribute to your retirement account. That's a great way to be able to do that. This information comes to us courtesy of an article put out by the folks at the Motley Fool. It's got some great information in it. We're going to hit the highlights on it. Certainly, banking your raises is one of the first and foremost things to be able to do to get on track to become a millionaire. So you start at 2%, you get like a couple percent raise. That allows you over the course of 4 or 5 years to get up to sort of that 10% threshold that we encourage people to get to in terms of saving money for retirement. Number two, another indication that you may be in trouble on the path towards amassing money for retirement is that you're paying high interest rate on the debt that you owe, whether that's your credit cards, your mortgage, your car loans, whatever the case may be. That says that your credit is not great or that you are spending too much. And of course, what that means is then it comes down to that B word, and that B word, of course, budget. That's how you keep track of your income, keep track of your expenses. If your rates are high on your car loans, rates are high on your credit cards, then what you need to do is work to improve the credit score. The credit score, the single biggest component of that is making sure that you're paying your bills on time. If you check out our various podcast channels, you'll be able to find a prior episode from probably about a month ago going into great detail of what makes up your credit score and ways in which you can improve that along the way. And that's really one of the ways in which to do that is to certainly pay your bills on time. That's the number one thing to do. Next up on the list is the notion that people count on Social Security to provide a substantial portion of their retirement income. And here's the thing, Social Security only was ever intended to cover 40% of your income. So that's all that it was intended to do in terms of replacing just 40% of your income. So what does that mean? Well, that means you've got to figure out a way to make up the other 60%. So if you're banking on Social Security to provide a substantial portion of your income, unfortunately, that's not the case, and that's not really what it was set up to do. So you've got to be thinking about that other 60%, where that's going to come from. That goes back to being able to save money on a regular basis to help achieve that goal of getting to millionaire. Because if you're banking on Social Security, that's probably a sign that, hey, you're probably not going to make it to that status. Similarly, putting off saving for retirement would also be one of the things that that you've got a warning sign, if you will, that you've got a problem with being able to get to that goal of becoming a millionaire, right? Because the longer you put it off, the less money you're going to have. Because when you start early, you take advantage of the concept of compound interest, right? And here's how compound interest works. It is a pretty powerful concept because it really does have an accelerating effect on the amount of savings that you have. So here's how it works. So let's say I make 10%, right? And I start with $10. So at the end of 1 year, that $10 is going to be worth $11, right? But then the next year, the 10% is not off the $10 base, it's now off the $11 base. And so ultimately, you may not see it initially, it might be a little, a few pennies here and there, but eventually that really starts to add up pretty dramatically. That's the power of compound interest. And the power of that accelerator works over time. So that's why it's important to start early rather than later in order to be able to take advantage of the notion of compound interest, because that's the only way that you're able to get to those higher dollar numbers, is by taking advantage of that. One of our associates at the office, Garrett, did a whole video on this notion of compound interest. I encourage you to check it out on Instagram, Facebook, and all those other places. But it's a great discussion of that topic of compound interest. It only works, or the accelerating effect of compound interest only works over time. It's not a one and done kind of concept. It's an over time kind of concept. And then lastly, here's one that we really worry about, because so often people are overcome by emotion of the overall market, and that is this notion that you're not investing enough in the market. If you look at your portfolio and you're incredibly heavy on the bond side and you're in your 40s, that's a warning sign that you're not going to be able to make it to the goal that you wanted to achieve in terms of how much money you wanted for retirement. So that's really something to really look at in terms of the investment side of things. Really look at that mix. I think far too often people today bend more on the conservative side. Obviously, in the middle of a pandemic, there's plenty of things to worry about. And I think sometimes people really get hung up on that. And so that turns their investment allocation to be much more conservative than what it should be, because at the end of the day, CDs, bonds, interest rates being what they are, you're just not going to see much of a return on that. So remember those warning signs. If you're seeing any of these warning signs, right, you're not banking your raises, you're taking out your debt is costing you too high of an interest rate, you're counting on Social Security to do too much, you're putting off starting to save, and you're not investing in the stock market. If any of those warning signs you can check the box on, then perhaps you need to reroute, because that's going to be an impediment to a goal of becoming a millionaire. We'll continue the conversation when we get back here on the program, Dollars and Cents. You want to know how to boost your return by over 1% per year in retirement without having to take any additional risk in your portfolio. That sounds like almost a too good to be true proposition, right? It's certainly something that requires a pretty in-depth conversation. So we're going to dig into that in this segment of the program. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. We're Central Florida's longest running radio program, coming to you on News Radio WFLA Orlando, along with 96.9 The Game. Also happen to be one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web. So make sure you check us out on your social media channels or podcast channels of choice. My name is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary with Nelson Financial Planning, where our team of certified financial fiduciaries stands ready this week to help you change your life with a successful and cost-effective retirement plan that produces superior investment results and provides you with peace of mind for the future. So, what's the secret behind boosting the return by over 1% per year in retirement without taking more risk in terms of what investments I'm owning? Well, according to a Vanguard study, it's actually a tax-efficient retirement income plan. Folks at Vanguard did a big study on this, and they concluded that a tax-efficient retirement income plan can add up to 1.1% per year on a retiree's return. And because it has to do with tax efficiency, right? I mean, that's just understanding what you have and what the tax code says about what you have. Then it doesn't require you to change your investment strategy to try and get more of a return. So certainly a pretty powerful concept when you think about it. 1% per year every year while you are retired, that's a tremendous amount of money. If you think of it in terms of, hey, that's a $1 million portfolio, that's the equivalent of $10,000 per year. Translating that to monthly income, that's about $800 per month more in your pocket. So this has some pretty powerful implications on what it works, how it works, and what you need to do to make sure that it really is working in your particular case. So let's start with the basics, if you will, on it. What's a retirement income plan anyway? So what a retirement income plan is that's sort of a specific plan that really looks at sort of all of your assets when you are entering into retirement or getting close to retirement. You certainly want to start to develop this a year or two away from retirement as well. Don't wait to just, I'm going to retire next week. And we set up this whole retirement income plan? No, you probably want to start to develop that a year or two before you get there. And what it does is it sort of looks at your entire financial picture, what you own, the nature of what you own, the tax nature of what you own, the liquidity nature of what you own, and then looks at it from a prism of what's going to be the tax implications and what ultimately do you have to do with certain assets. For example, some assets you may have required distributions on. Other things like Social Security, you may be able to avoid some taxation on. So that's sort of the concept behind what exactly a retirement income plan is. And certainly there's a host of factors that sort of come into play on this. So it has to be done at some level of expertise involved beyond just the investment side of things. There's got to be an understanding of sort of the tax side of things and the retirement side of things. It really sort of at its simplest, it's developing a tax efficient retirement income plan that starts with understanding that different accounts are taxed differently and have different rules associated with them, right? So the first step that you have to do is go through this process in order to really even start this concept of retirement income planning. It starts with sort of getting an understanding of what it is that you own and dividing things up by what we like to refer to as retirement assets, or regular investments are also sort of referred to as after tax investments. So if you start with the retirement side, you would further divide that up by, is it an IRA? Is it a 401k or 403b? Is it a 457? Is it a Roth? Is it an annuity? Each one of those is a little different, right? And I'm not going to delve into too deep of a detail in sort of the differences between those different retirement accounts. That's why we encourage folks to subscribe to our podcast channels, our YouTube channel, because we talk about this certainly in previous episodes and gotten into the details of sort of what's the nuances between these different types of accounts, because depending upon how old you are, there's ability to access without penalty and depending upon how old you are the other way, you may wind up having to take some money out at a certain rate. So certainly there's a lot of details there, but fundamentally it starts with sort of dividing up those retirement accounts among the different types that they actually are. And then on the other side, you would look at your regular or after-tax accounts, and that would be things like cash, real estate, rental property, businesses, investment accounts. And again, each one of those is different, right, in terms of that, not just their tax aspects, but also their liquidity and being able to access the money. So once that part is sort of done, right, you've kind of started the process by kind of dividing up, getting an idea as to what's the nature and the type of the asset that you have. Once that's done, according to Vanguard, in the study that Vanguard did, the general order of things, if you will, and this is very general because it's a highly specific exercise, but we at least wanted to kind of give you some general rules of thumb on the program today in order to get that extra 1% per year in terms of the return on your overall picture as a retiree. So the folks at Vanguard said, here's the general order that you want to be thinking about. First and foremost, of course, is the required minimum distribution. If you've got a required minimum distribution, then yeah, you've got to take that, and there's nothing you can do differently on that, because if you don't take it, it's a penalty equal to 50% of what you should have taken. So that kicks in today, nowadays, not age 70 and a half, that kicks in at 72. With some of the suggestions that may be happening in Congress with Secure Act 2, the proposed Secure Act 2 that we talked about last week on the program, you may see that age increase to 75. But for right now, it's 72. Those are your required minimum distribution. Ultimately, the required minimum distribution amounts to about 4% of your retirement accounts that have a required minimum distribution requirement. The next thing is sort of other taxable distributions, and that would be things like interest. That would be things like dividends. Rather than reinvest those, look to take those as income along the way from your regular or after-tax accounts. And then thirdly, in sort of the sequence that that the study prescribes, is then you would look at those after-tax accounts and look at making withdrawals from those. And then, of course, lastly would be distributions from pre-tax or traditional sort of retirement types of accounts. So that's kind of the four-step sequence, if you will. That's pretty general. I mean, that's a pretty general sequence. It also really requires, to really get into the details of this, to really run a tax projection through an actual tax return. That's why in our office at Nelson Financial Planning, we have not just an IRS enrolled agent, that's Christina. She's been with us now 15 years, maybe 20 years actually. And then of course, Kristen, who was our CPA, taking that information and running that all the way through an actual tax return projection to really see where those numbers fall. So certainly lots of things to kind of consider when you're thinking about this, sort of what's the future of tax rates, what's the impact of the Secure Act. We talked about that last week on the program in terms of how compressed the schedule is in terms of what your beneficiaries have to do in terms of taking that money out over a much shorter period of time. And then, you may want to look to fill up sort of those lower tax brackets, right? There's a 12% tax bracket now. Might be good to look at that and figure out a way to sort of fill that up. So there's certainly a lot to unpack from this Vanguard study, but bottom line, certainly a fascinating way to increase your ultimate portfolio return or your effective return by over 1% per year by just having that tax efficient retirement income plan. On next week's show, so much information here. On next week's show, we're going to talk about some of the 5 specific issues that can pop up beyond not having that tax efficient retirement income plan. So we're going to continue this a little bit more next week as well. Some good information here, and we want to make sure to unpack it fully. So we're going to take a break. When we come back from the break, we'll continue the program here on Dollars and Cents on News Radio WFLA Orlando. So it's the holiday season, right? And this is the time of year where, we got a holiday tie for our YouTube people. It's a holiday tie we're wearing because, after all, it is the holiday season. This time of year is when people can kind of get into trouble in terms of their spending, right? And so on the program today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the ways in which folks overspend, sort of highlight that, and maybe help you think about how you're spending money these days, and maybe ways that you cannot overspend. Wow, if my English teacher heard that, my English teacher was a long time ago. Anyway, we're going to give you some ideas on how you might be able to not overspend. Again, a double negative, I guess, on this holiday season. One of our associates, Garrett, here at the office, did a YouTube video and an Instagram video on this very topic, which we also attached to our blog post on our website at Nelson Financial Planning. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this topic, feel free to reference our blog post or our Instagram video. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show. My name is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary with Nelson Financial Planning. You're listening to Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. Central Florida's longest running radio program and one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web. So, national credit card debt is up over $200 billion over the past 5 years. I'd be curious to see kind of what the final numbers are going to be for this year, 2020, because obviously with this pandemic and the emotional toll, and we've talked about that on prior shows, the emotional toll that is having on people. One of the ways in which many people feel better is by spending money. I mean, that's just sort of human nature. So our fear is that, particularly when it's so easy to spend money these days, you don't even have to get out of bed. You can buy everything online and have it magically delivered to your door. The reality is that lends itself very well to overspending on a regular basis. So that is our concern in this time of year, where having a plan and having a budget and watching your income and watching your expenses, there's certainly ways in which people can get into a lot of trouble. So what are some of the things that people overspend on that perhaps you might be able to kind of find a different solution? And I guess this holiday season, a lot of people are spending money on clothing. And if you're paying full price, then chances are you may be overpaying. There's plenty of tricks to get around full price, from using promo codes that are online, from using coupons, joining loyalty programs. My youngest son loves to thrift. He all the time finds great stuff at a lot of the thrift stores around Central Florida, and and really enjoys it. He always comes back with like a bag of stuff, and I'm like, "How much money did you spend?" And he has his own job, by the way. He works for an ice cream shop during the course of the year, and he's like, "Oh, I spent $15, and I got all of this." So that's certainly a great way to not overspend. I mean, he's getting like label stuff like Patagonia. I mean, he's getting some labeled stuff through his thrifting. So certainly that's a great way to be able to do that. Another thing that I think people overspend money on is, and unfortunately we've got one sitting here, which we're holding up for the camera. It's bottled water. Okay, we're not advertising for this particular company, but that put the water in the bottle. But this is basically more expensive than gas on a price per gallon. So there's another way to do that, and usually I do have the plastic, the refillable bottle. It was a bottle that I got from Target. They're all over you see them all the time. When did they? anyway, the clear plastic bottles, but you know what I'm talking about. That's a much better way to do it, right? And normally I do, but today I didn't, but I had to grab one to get the through the show. The reality is that filling up a reusable plastic bottle is a much better way to not just save money, but also, at the end of the day, you're saving the environment because this plastic stuff goes elsewhere. But anyway, don't do what I'm doing right now and drink out of a disposable plastic bottle. Plus, you're also going to save money. Another way to be saving money and not overspending is on car insurance, right? I think far too often, or just insurance in general, the longer you stay with somebody and the rate keeps trickling up, the notion that you then wind up overpaying for that coverage is certainly very true indeed, because the insurance companies kind of work on that principle that you're less likely to kind of shop it around, move it around. The reality is, if you do that on a regular basis, then you wind up you're sort of continuing to kind of reset to a lower pricing model. So we encourage you to shop around every 2, 3, 4 years. Often find that you can reduce your rates by maybe a couple $100 a year. So it's certainly a way to save money there. Here's the other thing that I would also comment on is that I think far too often, hold on, I got to take a sip out of the disposable water. Way more expensive than gas on a per gallon basis, by the way. Anyway, when you go to dollar type stores, right? Super cheap, you can get a lot of stuff. I remember that my kids used to love to go to those stores. The only problem is that literally by the end of the day, everything would be broken. And so cheap things don't last. And my kids learned that sort of the hard way by going into a place like, a dollar store or whatever, dollar whatever. There's a ton of them out there. Not trying to pick out anyone in particular, but most of that stuff is, not most of that stuff, all of that stuff. That's why they're able to sell it, right? If they're able to sell something for $1 that was made in China, came over on a big giant ship, got delivered to the store, chances are it's pretty cheaply made. And that's the problem with those types of stores, is that you might think, oh, I'm walking out with a bunch of stuff, but the reality is by the end of the day, none of that stuff's still going to be in one piece. So cheap things are in cheap. So we got a bunch more of these kinds of things, or Garrett covers a bunch more on the blog post. So check out our website, nelsonfinancialplanning.com, for the blog post, along with a corresponding video as well. We wanted to share some of those topics, though, of ways or places where people overspend on their money, particularly during the holiday season. Anyway, we're going to wrap it on up and get on out of here. Thanks for listening to the program. This has been Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris on News Radio WFLA Orlando.